I want to bring in Mark Regev. He's a senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you very much, Mr. Regev, to have you on the show. Really important to get your voice and your perspective here. You heard our top story there, the IDF saying that its forces are increasing operational readiness for the next stage of this war. Just give us a sense of what you're getting in terms of how imminent this expected incursion into Gaza may be.
So I think we spent the first few days after the massacre of October 7th playing defense. We had still scores of terrorists on our side of the frontier, and there were various hostage situations where they'd taken people and threatening to kill them. And so we were then focusing on protecting our people inside Israel where the terrorists were still active, unfortunately killing people and committing atrocities. Once the area outside the Gaza Strip was more or less cleaned up of terrorists, then we move to offensive. And I think that offensive now is going to get greater, and we're going to hit the Hamas military machine very hard. We're going to hit Hamas targets very hard. From our point of view, Hamas, and I think they showed the whole world, they're a brutal enemy that uses ISIS-type tactics, and we are going to literally dismantle their military machine.
And I know you won't want to give too much away in terms of military information here, Mr. Regev, but we heard Prime Minister Netanyahu saying we're ready. Give us a sense of how soon. Are we looking at 24, 48 hours, looking days, weeks here?
I'm not going to be more specific than I have been, other than to say the pressure on Hamas will continue to increase.
Yeah.
And as Israel moves forward to take on Hamas inside its home territory, obviously the risks to Israeli soldiers goes up. We have no illusions about Hamas's ability to fight. They are in their home territory, as I said. They've got bunkers, they've got underground tunnels. They are a dangerous foe. We will win. But those young Israeli men and women going into combat, they are risking their lives for their country. And they are fighting a ruthless enemy that showed the whole world just a week ago how ruthless and brutal and horrific it can be.
And we were showing our viewers the situation for so many making their way south, following many of them heeding the call by Israel. That window for a safe passage, though, Mr. Regev, that's expired. Will Israel be extending this further? And if not, I mean, what does this mean for the tens of thousands still hoping to get out?
So I think the story about the evacuation actually, I think, shows a larger picture. Because Israel knows there's going to be fighting in that northern part of the Gaza Strip, because there Hamas has placed a large part of its military machine, missile launchers, underground tunnels, arms depot, command and control centers. They're all there. And often they're underground, right underneath civilian structures. And we don't want to see innocent civilians caught up in the crossfighting between us and Hamas. And so we asked people, for their own safety, please move away, and we created safe corridors for people to travel. Now, it's interesting. Hamas itself said, don't leave, saying, people, you should stay, and you should become martyrs for our fanatical cause. And when people didn't heed Hamas's order, they actually blocked roads and physically prevented people from leaving. And why is this important? Because Israel, which is theoretically their enemy, we are trying to save lives by telling people, please evacuate a future combat zone, while Hamas, which claims to speak for the Palestinians, wants them killed. It is the crazy logic of an extreme terrorist group.
In the meantime, CNN, Mr. Regev, has learnt that healthcare facilities in the north and the city of Gaza will not be complying with Israel's evacuation orders to her south, saying these threats effectively act, and I'm going to quote them here, as a death sentence for the thousands of injured and the patients housed within these facilities. If people can't move or won't move, what happens to them? What considerations are being made here?
So obviously a place like a hospital we know about, and of course we will act to protect it. But you need to know, and the viewers need to know, that in the past, Hamas has had no qualms whatsoever about using hospitals and schools and other humanitarian sites for their war machine. There were documented cases in previous rounds of fighting where Hamas was storing missiles on UN facilities inside the Gaza Strip. But we in Israel, we don't target hospitals, we don't target innocent civilians. Our enemy is the brutal Hamas military machine, and we will be targeting that machine. Now, we didn't want this war in the first place. They took us by surprise, unexpectedly. They slaughtered our people, they massacred our people in the most brutal act of anti-Semitic violence since the terrible years of the Holocaust. They kidnapped and took hostage over 120 Israelis and took them back to Gaza, and they're in some, I presume, in some underground basements. And I don't know how they're being treated. I can only presume the worst. This is a brutal enemy, an enemy that uses ISIS-type tactics. Not that I said so, not that the Israeli government says so, but the US government and the British and others have used that terminology. This is a group that beheaded people. This is a group that burnt people alive. This is a group that walked into rooms and saw a baby in bed and shot them multiple times with automatic fire. These people are ruthless. And in defeating them, I think we're not only protecting the people of Israel, I think we're doing the Palestinian people of Gaza a favor.
And many Palestinians and many in Gaza trying to move southwards, of course, as heeding the calls from Israel. We've heard in the last hour, Mr. Regev, the Egyptian foreign minister speaking to our Wolf Blitzer, saying that the Rafah crossing on the Gaza side, they're saying the roads there are inoperable due to aerial bombardment. What is your understanding of what is happening there in terms of the Rafah crossing? Because many people, of course, can't get out. Those dual citizens, Americans, Palestinians, even the British Palestinian doctor whose daughter I just spoke to.
I have no doubt that this conflict has been terrible for people on both sides of the frontier. We've had to evacuate Israelis living in border communities. Unfortunately, we only managed to evacuate them after many of them were killed or taken hostage, kidnapped to Gaza. There were entire communities where a third of the population were killed. In Gaza, we're trying to have people evacuate before there is bloodshed. That is the hope. Now, I know it's difficult, and I know there are people who are trapped. But our goal is to get people out of the firing line, innocent people. As to the Rafah crossing, there has been fighting around there. Hamas has used the Gaza side of the crossing for its military machine. We are talking to relevant international actors. We are willing to help people leave who want to leave, with the permission of the Egyptians, of course. It's their sovereign territory. But we're open to all sorts of discussions to facilitate the exit of foreign nationals if their host governments ask us to, and we're happy to help.
And very, very briefly as well, we've heard that the IDF in the last, 24 hours or so has been conducting raids into Gaza. Give us a sense, Mr. Regev, of what Israel has learned about the hostages here ahead of this ground incursion, because this is critical.
It is, and it's a difficult question for us because we've got over 120, maybe closer to 150 people who have been taken hostage inside Gaza, and we fear for their safety. So we say on this issue, we say two things. Number one, we tell Hamas that we're watching closely, and if anyone hurts these captives, these hostages, if they are harmed, we will find the people responsible, and we will act to bring about justice. Anyone involved in harming hostages we will punish them. It might take a month, it might take a year, it might take 10 years, but justice will be meted out against people who harm hostages.
And now that I've got you here, in the last, what I would say, 20 minutes or so, Mr. Regev, we've heard that Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has had a call with President Biden where he called for an immediate halt to all attacks. He said that called for an immediate halt to all attacks, adherence to international humanitarian law. He also stressed the need for urgent humanitarian corridors to provide essential supplies and utilities to Gaza while rejecting the eviction of Palestinians. Your reaction, sir?
Well, when it comes to Gaza, President Abbas is at very best a ceremonial head of state. He has no power in Gaza. Hamas controls Gaza. And so he is in many ways a spectator looking from the outside in. But I would tell you, as an Israeli, we are frustrated, though maybe not surprised, that the so-called Palestinian Authority, which is supposedly moderate, which is supposedly a partner in peace, which is the international interlocutor for governments around the world, they have refused to condemn the terrible, terrible massacre that occurred on October 7th. They refused to condemn the rapes, the beheadings, the burning of bodies, the butchering of children. They refused to condemn the kidnapping. Now, the whole civilized world has unequivocally condemned these heinous acts perpetrated by Hamas. Iran has refused to do so. Some of the Arab countries have refused to do so, though I have to tell you, some have condemned, and we embrace those Arabs who will condemn this violence. But the Palestinian Authority says it's a peace partner. The Palestinian Authority says it wants a deal with Israel. And yet their behavior in this crisis has not been good. And their failure to stand up for what is right, their failure to condemn the Hamas atrocities, unfortunately, speaks to a larger problem.
Mr. Regev, I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.